I was 23 the summer everything changed. The summer I came home to a house that never really felt like mine. My name's Ethan Collins, and I'd been living away in Chicago for school, doing everything I could to keep my distance from my father and his cold, bitter world. I didn't even know he'd remarried until I got a text from a cousin with a picture of the ceremony. I wasn't invited, didn't expect to be. My dad, Richard Collins, always kept people at arm's length, even his own blood. He raised me on discipline and silence, not affection. And I still remember the sound of my mother's suitcase wheels on the driveway the night she left for good. I was 12. No one ever really told me why. Coming back that summer, I wasn't hoping for closure or warmth. I just needed a place to stay while I figured out my next move. But the moment I walked into that house, everything felt different. Not in a good way, just off. Then I saw her, Madeline. She was standing in the kitchen wearing a pale green sundress, her auburn hair pinned up, hands wet from washing dishes. She looked up, smiled softly, and said, "You must be Ethan." Her voice was gentle, too gentle for this house. She was 34, only 11 years older than me, and way too beautiful to be with a man like my father. There was something graceful about her, like she didn't belong in this place full of locked doors and unspoken rules. She moved quietly, spoke with purpose, and carried herself like someone who had lived through pain and learned to hide the scars. I couldn't take my eyes off her, not in a lustful way at first, but in that slow, lingering kind of way that sneaks up on you. She didn't try to mother me. She didn't ask questions, just made space, like she knew I needed it. At first, we barely spoke beyond polite hellos. My dad would be gone most evenings, either working late or drinking with people he didn't like. Madeline stayed in the den, reading with a cup of tea, listening to jazz just loud enough to drown out the emptiness. One night, maybe 4 or 5 days after I got back, I passed by the den to grab a glass of water. It was late, maybe midnight. The lights were low, thunder outside. She was sitting alone, wearing a thin robe that barely clung to her shoulder, barefoot, her long legs tucked beneath her. She looked up from her book and said, "Couldn't sleep." I shook my head. "Me neither," she said, patting the couch cushion beside her. I hesitated. I don't know why. Maybe because I already felt the shift happening inside me, that strange, quiet curiosity you're not supposed to have. But I sat down, far at first. Then, over the course of that hour, something changed. Didn't talk about much: books, the rain, what I was studying. But she laughed once at something I said, and it made my heart ache in a way I hadn't felt in years. When her hand brushed against mine, she didn't pull it back. And neither did I. She didn't move away. And that was the moment everything began, not with a kiss, not with a touch, but with a silence between two people who knew they were about to cross a line they could never uncross. Asterisk, it was just after midnight when I came downstairs again, a few days after that first quiet evening with Madeline. The house was silent except for the soft rumbles of thunder rolling in from the distance. The kind of night that makes you feel like you're the only one awake in the world. I wasn't expecting anyone to be up, but this soft golden light from the den spilled down the hallway. And there she was, Madeline, curled up on the couch again, this time in a deep navy robe that clung to her curves in a way I couldn't ignore anymore. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, a book forgotten on her lap, and a glass of wine half finished beside her. When she looked up at me, her eyes held something different. Something softer. Something warmer. "You can't sleep either?" she asked, her voice low, like it didn't want to disturb the night. I shook my head, suddenly unsure of what to do with my hands or where to look. She patted the cushion beside her, the same as before, and said gently, "Then stay a while." I sat down, not too close, but not far either. It's a kind of distance that said we were still pretending this was innocent. Pretending we weren't already playing with fire. The storm outside grew louder, and inside the tension between us thickened like the summer air. We talked, but not like we had before. This time it felt more personal. She told me about her late husband, how he died young, a car accident in Vermont and how that silence never really left her. I told her about my mom, how she left one night without warning, and how I still wait for answers that never come. Madeline didn't say much in response. She just listened. And the way she looked at me, like she actually saw me, made something crack open inside. No one had looked at me like that in years. Not with pity, not with judgment. Just understanding. Her knee brushed mine at some point. Neither of us moved away. It was such a small touch, but it felt like electricity under my skin. I remember looking at her hands, long fingers, a simple silver ring, her nails unpainted, and wanting to take them in mine. But I didn't. Not yet. She sipped her wine and said, "Sometimes I feel like I'm living in someone else's life." I didn't know what to say, so I just whispered, "Me too." There was a long silence then, not awkward, not uncomfortable, just full. And then she leaned back, and so did I, and suddenly we were sitting so close, shoulder to shoulder. I could smell the faint vanilla of her skin, feel the warmth of her leg against mine, and I knew we both knew this wasn't just comfort anymore. This was the beginning of something dangerous, something forbidden. But neither of us moved. The world outside the window kept pouring down rain, but in that moment it felt like we were wrapped in something separate from it all, something intimate and still. She didn't reach for me. I didn't reach for her. But the space between us disappeared anyway. And the look she gave me before I left, slow, deep, filled with every word we couldn't say, stayed with me long after I went back to my room. That night, Madeline sat beside me and didn't move away. And without touching her, I was already falling. Asterisk after that night. Everything between Madeline and me started to shift, slowly but unmistakably. It wasn't what we said, it was how we looked at each other, how we lingered a second too long. In the hallway, how we both pretended not to notice the way the air changed when we were alone. Every evening, once my father had stomped upstairs or left the house for one of his late nights at the bar, I'd find myself drifting toward the den. And she would already be there, sitting in that same spot on the couch like she was waiting. For me, we never planned it, never talked about it, it just kept happening. One night turned into 2, then 3, and suddenly it felt like we had our own world. Separate from the one filled with tension and silence upstairs. In that quiet space, everything was softer. She'd pour 2 glasses of wine now, not just one. Sometimes we'd talk about music, movies, little things, but more often we just sat in the warm silence, close enough to feel each other's breath. Every night the space between us grew smaller. Every look meant more. There was a kind of ache in those moments, like both of us were holding back something too big to name, and yet neither of us moved forward. Not yet. My father barely noticed anything. He was too distracted by his own world, full of business meetings, phone calls, and whatever bitterness he carried, like a badge of honor. He never looked closely at her, never saw the quiet sadness behind her eyes, never noticed how often she disappeared into herself. But I did. And she noticed me noticing. One evening, I came into the kitchen while she was putting away dishes. Her robe sleeve fell down slightly, and I saw a faint scar near her wrist. She noticed me looking and quickly pulled it back up. "Car accident," she said softly, turning away. But I knew it was something else. That's when I realized she wasn't just beautiful, she was wounded. And for some reason, that made me want her even more. I wanted to protect her, to hold her, to be the man she should have ended up with instead of my father. That night, when we sat together again, something was different. It wasn't just quiet and soft. It was heavy, like a dam about to break. I looked at her, she looked at me. No words, just the sound of the storm outside the window and the humming of our hearts in the silence. And then it happened, the first kiss. It wasn't fast or wild. It was slow, almost hesitant, like we were asking each other for permission without speaking. Her lips were warm, trembling slightly against mine. I felt her hand rest gently on my neck, and for one brief moment, the world around us disappeared. but just as quickly as it began, she pulled back. Her eyes filled with something that looked like fear and longing all at once. She whispered, "We shouldn't," and stood up, hugging her arms around herself as she walked away, leaving me alone on the couch with the taste of hers still on my lips and my heart pounding in my chest. That kiss changed everything. Even though we didn't speak about it the next day or the day after that, we both knew we had crossed a line. And no matter how hard we tried to act normal, the weight of that kiss followed us everywhere. The secret grew between us like a shadow neither of us could escape. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this was only the beginning. After that first kiss, we were never the same. Even though we tried to act like it hadn't happened, every glance, every silence between us was louder than words. The space we once kept between us disappeared night by night until it didn't feel wrong anymore. It just felt real. The need between us grew deeper than anything I'd ever felt. Madeline stopped pretending. So did I. Some nights we didn't talk at all. We just sat close, breathing the same air, her leg pressed against mine, her head resting lightly on my shoulder. It was like we were drowning in something beautiful but dangerous, too strong to resist. The tension snapped the night. We finally let it. It was late, past midnight, and I had come down to find her in the kitchen wearing one of my dad's old flannel shirts, barefoot, her hair messy like she'd just woken up from a dream. She looked at me like she was tired of holding back. And I couldn't take it anymore. I walked straight to her and kissed her again, harder this time, without apology. She didn't pull away. Instead, she wrapped her arms around my neck, clinging to me like she'd been waiting for that moment longer than she wanted to admit. That night, we didn't stop at a kiss. We crossed every line. We made love on the living room couch, slow and quiet, like we were afraid the house itself might hear us. Her skin was warm, her hands trembling, and the way she whispered my name made the guilt in my chest twist with pleasure. I didn't feel like a boy anymore. She didn't feel like someone else's wife. We were just two people who had been starved of connection for too long. When it was over, she curled into my chest and cried, not because she regretted it, but because we both knew it would never be simple again. She told me she hadn't felt wanted in years, that she'd married my father not out of love, but out of fear. Fear of being alone, of never being seen again. I told her I had always felt invisible in my own house. That with her, I finally felt real. And in that moment, we weren't stepson and stepmother. We were just two broken people trying to hold on to something that felt alive. The days after were a blur of stolen touches and long looks, whispered hellos and lingering goodbyes. My father was too distracted to notice. He was always on the phone or out drinking with business friends who didn't care about him. So the few times he was home, he treated Madeline like a shadow. He never really saw her, never asked where she'd been, never asked why she was quieter. But I saw everything. I saw the way she smiled only when we were alone. I saw the sadness in her eyes when she knew we couldn't keep doing this forever. But we did it anyway. Because when we were together, the world felt like it stopped spinning. It was wrong, yes, but it was also the most honest thing I'd ever felt. We had created our own little world inside a house that was built on silence and coldness. And we knew deep down that eventually that world would crack. But in the moments we let ourselves fall anyway deeper into each other, deeper into the danger, deeper into the kind of love you only find once, even if it ruins everything else. Asterisk, the thing about secrets is, they don't stay quiet forever, no matter how careful you are, no matter how deep you bury them. And as much as Madeline and I tried to keep our world hidden, cracks were starting to show. It wasn't anything obvious. Just small things, the way her eyes followed me across a room, how I always knew exactly what coffee she liked, how her hand would brush mine for just a second too long when no one else was looking. My father, Richard, wasn't a fool. Cold, distant, and emotionally blind, yes, but not stupid. One night, he came home earlier than usual. No warning. Just walked in through the front door around 9 p.m. while Madeline and I were curled up together on the back patio, sharing a blanket, sipping wine, talking about nothing and everything. We jumped apart like kids caught doing something wrong, but it was too late. He saw just enough. The way she looked at me, the guilt on my face, the color in her cheeks. He didn't say a word that night. He just stared at us, eyes like glass, then turned and went straight to his office, slamming the door. After that, everything changed. The house felt colder. My father watched us now, quietly, sharply. He stopped staying out late. He stopped drinking. He was always around, always listening. And Madeline, she began to pull away. Not completely, but enough. Her touches became softer, shorter. She started closing her door at night. She wouldn't meet my eyes the same way. It was like she was trying to undo everything we had shared, stitch by stitch. But I could still feel it in her. Glances, in the way her voice cracked when she said my name. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. I went to her room. She opened the door barely and stood there in a long white t-shirt, her eyes tired and red. I whispered, "Why are you acting like we didn't happen?" And she whispered back, "Because your father knows. Because it's not just a secret anymore, it's a storm." I stepped closer, I don't care, and I meant it. I didn't care what it destroyed. I just couldn't stand losing her. She looked at me like she was trying not to fall apart. "But I do," she said. "I care. Because if this blows up, I'll be the one blamed. I'll be the villain." I reached for her hand, but she pulled it away. And that broke something in me. "You told me you felt alive with me," I said. "I still do," she whispered, her voice shaking. Achoo. "But sometimes love isn't enough." She closed the door gently, and I stood there, frozen, listening to the sound of her sobs through the wall. That was the first night I realized what heartbreak really felt like, not loud, not angry, but quiet and sharp, like being cut from the inside. The next morning, she avoided me completely, and my father sat across from me at breakfast and said, calm and cold, "I hope you enjoyed your little summer fantasy, because it ends now." I didn't answer. I didn't move. And for the first time, I understood that I hadn't just fallen for a woman I couldn't have. I had fallen into something that would tear this entire house apart. And the worst part, I would still choose her even if it meant losing everything else. Asterisk. The days that followed were quiet, but not the peaceful kind. It was the kind of silence that fills a house when everything has already been broken. Madeline moved like a ghost, her smile gone, her voice careful. My father didn't yell, didn't explode. He just watched. Every move, every word, like a hunter waiting to strike. I kept trying to get close to her, just to talk, to understand where we stood now, but she avoided me like the guilt was eating her alive. And maybe it was. One night, I waited until the house was still, then went to her room one last time. The door was unlocked. She was sitting on the edge of the bed in a simple black tank top and jeans, a suitcase half-packed beside her. She didn't look surprised to see me, almost like she had been expecting it. I closed the door behind me, slowly, and said her name. It's just her name. She looked up at me with tears already in her eyes. "He gave me a choice," she whispered. "Leave quietly or stay and ruin what's left of this family." I stepped toward her, but she shook her head. "You don't understand, Ethan. If I stay, he'll destroy both of us." He already started calling his lawyer. Her voice broke. "He said he'd make sure you're cut off. He said I'd be painted as the seducer. That no one would ever believe it was love." I dropped to my knees in front of her, my hands gently holding her waist. "But it was love," I said. "Maybe it still is." She cupped my face, her thumbs tracing the edges of my jaw. "You saved me, Ethan," she said. "But I can't stay here. Not like this." I kissed her one last time, slow, desperate, filled with every word we were too scared to say out loud. She kissed me back like it hurt, like letting go was the only thing worse than staying. When we pulled apart, I rested my forehead against hers. "Where will you go?" I asked. She smiled through tears. "Somewhere no one knows me. Somewhere quiet. I just, I need to breathe again." I nodded, even though my chest felt like it was collapsing. "Will I ever see you again?" I asked. She didn't answer. She just pressed her lips to my forehead, stood up, and zipped her bag. That was the last time I saw her. She left before dawn. No note, no goodbye, just silence. My father never spoke of her again. Not once. A week later, her number was disconnected. Her social media wiped clean. It was like she never existed. I searched. For months, I searched. But she was gone. And maybe that was her way of protecting me, giving me the freedom to move on. Or maybe she had just finally chosen herself. It's been 2 years now. Still think about her when the nights are long and the world feels too quiet. Still see her face when I close my eyes. I never told anyone the truth. Not friends, not family. It was ours. Still is. Some loves don't have happy endings. Some loves are meant to wake you up, tear you open, and leave you forever changed. She was mine. And even though she's gone, she's the only woman who ever made me feel like I was truly seen. That one night she sat beside me. It changed everything. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough.